Today, we're going to talk about a very important woman that has left a deep legacy here at the Oil Museum of Canada. We're going to be discussing the career of Ruth Home. Ruth Home was a museum educator that got her start in 1928 at the Royal Ontario Museum, commonly referred to as the ROM. Like many women of her time, she got involved in education and started many of the educational initiatives that we think are so commonplace in museums today. Like many people that worked in museums, especially in the education department, if they happened to be women, they were not paid very well, or if they were paid at all. It relied on women with passion and integrity and drive wanting to contribute to their communities. Ruth was one of those women. She was employed at the Royal Ontario Museum from 1928 until 1945. She was involved as an instructress. This was her title. She would give little lectures on Saturday mornings or to women in the community about some objects or stories that were told by the museum. This was pretty revolutionary at that time period because museums were very focused on academia, not a place for the general public, but more as a place for where academics and researchers could go to look at objects to write papers for universities. As a woman working in this institution, she was more interested in opening up the collections and the stories to women and children and people of all walks of life. She was so involved in trying to make the ROM Ontario's museum by working and partnering with the Canadian Pacific Railway to create museum days. These are special days where people from outside of the Toronto area could take a train paid for by the Canadian Pacific Railway and travel to the Royal Ontario Museum for special educational initiatives where the whole community, mums, dads, children, aunties, everybody within the community could come and take part in museum programming. She was instrumental in creating these lectures on Saturday mornings or on evenings, and she set up a children's educational room in the rotunda underneath the stairs where you could have hands-on learning. A lot of these initiatives are still prevalent within museums today, and she received a lot of pushback from her superiors for opening the museum up to a different clientele. Women, children, and people from many different walks of life that were not university academics. She eventually pushed so hard that they created a new Department of Education at the Royal Ontario Museum. Unfortunately, they instituted a male person as the new curator and director of museum education, the former curator of mammalogy. This was something that Ruth was very upset about, as she was the one that built all the programs, was involved in all the outreach initiatives, and because of her gender, she was kept out of some of those leadership positions. She was very upset that in 1945, instead of taking a lesser position under somebody who had no experience in museum education, she left the Royal Ontario Museum. She created new positions for herself as a consultant, and she was heavily involved in the consulting and opening up of many of Ontario's new museums, whether that be the Wellington County Museum, the Hiram Walker Museum, and eventually the Oil Museum of Canada. She helped design many of the exhibits and advocated for bringing on professional architects and designers to help facilitate this. She helped guide the museum committee into what those pillars of the museum should be. And she has influenced us even today in that we at the Oil Museum are deeply committed to museum education and fostering inclusion for everybody, from adults to seniors to children, and educational programs that meet the needs of our community. We still offer Thursday night programming on an irregular basis. We have lots of educational initiatives for schools and school children, PD days, all of these things to bring the community together. We've also really heavily invested in seniors outreach, going into long-term care homes, bringing the museum outside of its traditional walls into the community. Because of Ruth's influence, the museum today offers and strives to serve every member of the community without barriers. Regardless of your gender, your cultural affiliations, the museum is for you. And we have Ruth Home as a legacy for that initiative. Hope to see you again here at the Oil Museum of Canada.